The next panel is on how to shape and lead innovation-driven organizations for sciencepreneurship, to cultivate sciencepreneurship within those organizations. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, their organization, and why they're on this panel. So why they believe they're on the panel. They haven't been prepped in any way for that, so this is spontaneous, as is on innovation itself. So Max, over to you.
Okay, is this on?
He's going to, yeah.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Henry Marx. I'm a Staatssekretär here in Berlin. It's kind of hard to translate that. Some translate as parliamentary secretary, some as Secretary of State. It's hard to translate, but I run the Department for Academia, Research and Science here in Berlin. So why I'm on this panel? Traditionally, German universities had two objectives. That is teaching and research. And more it has become a third mission. The third mission is transfer, entrepreneurship, getting ideas into the economic cycle. And I think this is becoming more and more important, especially in a country such as Germany that needs knowledge to drive its economic growth. So basically, what do we do? What can we do as a state? Because as you will know, and most of you are from here or close by, we have very few private universities. Most of our universities are governmentally funded, but they're autonomous. So what can the state actually do to help in that context? Basically, our job is to provide funding to the universities, but also set goals with them. And we just recently here in Berlin had the Hochschulverträge, so new contracts with our universities, setting out the goals for the next 5 years. And we put a lot of, I think, very good ideas into concerning the topic that we're speaking here about today. But we also have learned that we need to take some of these details more seriously, because especially in our position is we provide funding, we want to steer them towards their goals a bit, but leave them autonomous. So what do we need? We need more data. We need more concepts of like how can we definitely define what is success in transfer and funding ideas, patterns, and bringing them into economic cycle. So there's still a lot of work to be done, because it sounds easy at first. Yeah, you just give them money and they'll do their job. Because then one question is, how will you know in the end if what they did with that money? So finding these sort of a report system that works for the universities, that does not burden them with unnecessary bureaucracy, but gives us some sort of a feedback, and in which we can then, as partners, develop new ideas, shape and details. That is pretty much what, the Senatsverwaltung, so the authorities here in Berlin can try to do and help in that respect.
Raphael, you're an entrepreneur that has experienced this difficulty perhaps with the bureaucracy and understanding that new world as well. So we'll come to that, we'll map that in as well, because this is a challenge. Any public-private enterprise coming together has its challenges as well. So we're going to discuss that type of thing. But Raphael, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Raphael. I'm the founding director of SPRIND, the German Agency for Disruptive Innovation, which was modeled a bit after ARPA, and I think that has been mentioned before. The only reason I'm here is because we're paying the bill, right?
It's not true. That's not true.
So at least I'm trying to be entertaining. No, in a way, I think we're pretty much implementing sciencepreneurship at SPRIND, because that's what we're here for. Our job is to sort of help translation of discoveries in science, but also maybe in your garage, doesn't really matter, into something that creates value to the people. We're spending tax dollars, so we're not a VC. We're not saying we want a return on investment in the sense that we want return on our money, but we want to create things that make the lives of the people better. And that requires sciencepreneurship, obviously, and I guess we're going to talk a lot about this. We're in our 4th year, so we've done quite a bit. We're about 60 people now. The black guys with the shirts say hello. Hey, black guys. So you're going to see us. This, we got a few tickets out of our sponsorship as well. So everybody's here. And we're sort of at speed now. We launched this for 2.5 years. We've got now maybe 100, 120 projects in financing through our challenge mechanisms. That's like the DARPA grant challenges, our project work, our validation. The funding is between 200K and maybe 100 million, depending on the project in the life cycle. We're evolving the agency, so we're sort of reinventing ourselves. We're just now getting some kind of law, which is called the SPRIND Liberty Law. So sort of, it's like a Munchausen, right? The guy that pulled himself, well, I can't do that anymore, but you know what he did, where you're sort of building the plane whilst flying it in a way. And we're doing that, and next week, Thursday, knock on wood, hopefully this law will go through Parliament, and then SPRIND will be a very unique instrument for science and entrepreneurship funding. So stay tuned, and we're probably going to talk a bit more about this.
Brilliant, brilliant, thank you. Julia?
I'm next. So I'm here because SPRIND asked me to be here. In a way. I'm a lawyer by background. I worked in economy for 20 years as an HR manager. And then suddenly I found myself in a ministry, the Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs in Berlin here, leading a department called Digitalization and Future of Work, where we met first time. And this created for me the crazy idea that administration and science and research as a part of administration are somehow the building fundamentals for working democracy. And coming from economy, I was really astonished how few the focus was on how to lead the organization. Yeah, meaning what does the organization need to work properly? And when I exited around about 1.5 years ago, I founded together with a consulting company, a company that's, which is really dedicated for innovation in administration, and a big part of it is really to support innovators in universities to create innovation in universities. And I think the precondition to do innovation in universities is to understand which kind of organization you're working with. And this is a big lag, and this is maybe something which might be interesting to talk about today. What are the pillars for innovation and then also for entrepreneurship in universities?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
I spoke quite a bit already, but I'm Benoit Schilling.
There's some new people here, though, Benoit, so yeah.
So I'm the CTO of Google X, and I mean, I think the reason I'm on the panel is that Google X is a very unusual intersection of skills and needs. As I mentioned earlier, our mission is to do moonshot, very ambitious project which have a positive impact. But the other role that we have is really to be scout for Google, for Alphabet, to really see what are those technology, what are also those products that will become very important in the 5 to 10 years old distance. When we do a project, we're not just looking about doing cute and cool technology. We do have that strong conviction that the way to scale technology, which has a positive impact on the world, needs to rely also on economics. That if you do something that loses money, it is quite hard to develop it and to deploy it. So we are really at that intersection of finding what science is able to do, finding how that translates into technology and finding innovation there, but also understanding that this could lead to viable, positive type of business. What's also interesting is that we do have many people coming from university. So we do have a pretty good look of what works and what does not, and what type of detox we need to put people on before they accept the way we work at X. So that's probably also a great subject of discussion.
Brilliant. Your colleague Astro Teller, so Astro is the CEO of X, and he has a brilliant saying that he says you cannot pre-business plan a moonshot, because it's just like trying to paint a masterpiece by color by numbers, because you don't know how it's going to play out. And this speaks back to what you talked about, Julia, where you have to understand what type of organization we are in order to understand what type of leadership and what type of personnel we mean as well. So that's between the two of you maybe to discuss that idea. Over to you. Yeah, please.
Well, maybe to start with some experiences from a program that we did the last 9 months. We worked together with a foundation that is dedicated for innovation in universities, especially in teaching, in German Stiftung für Innovation in der Hochschullehre. And they sent us around about 50 people who are working on innovation projects in universities. Part of it is dedicated to teaching, part of it to entrepreneurship and other things. And it was really interesting because in the first phase it was a totally disillusioned journey that we did with them, obviously. Because they said after the first module, they said, okay, what we did until now, it doesn't lead anywhere because we're working on the wrong playing field. right? So what we did is trying to get an understanding where they can negotiate what they do, because universities, different to economic organizations, you can't just say from the top we do it that way, because you probably know in Germany we have Article 5, Chapter 5 of the German Constitution, which gives totally freedom to teaching and research. And every professor you talk to says, well, I'm totally free to do whatever I'm supposed to do. So the problem is, if universities want to scale, like digitalization issues, if they want to use data, everybody somehow has to contribute. But you can't dictate it from the top. You have to agree on something on a collegial level, right? So this is totally different to what we know from economic organizations, because there you have a hierarchy who's deciding something, and the issue of the management is to declinate it through the organization. And this totally doesn't work in universities. And this you have to understand. So you have to understand that you have to negotiate. You have to understand that you need something that you can offer, yeah, because your idea is brilliant. And they all said, well, of course it's brilliant to do innovation in teaching. Yeah, but the professors say, well, we don't have any incentive on doing good teaching, because it's about publications and it's about funding, right? If we do good teaching or not doesn't play any role for our career. So I think we have, on the one side, we have to create this understanding in universities, how to steer, how to change their own organizations. On the other side, I think it's very interesting, it goes more into your direction, to think about which kind of incentives we might put in Förderrichtlinien, in funding systems, for example. Yeah? So that you have a kind of incentive to change something in your thinking, in your action. Because if you don't have this incentive by your own position, because the incentives are good publication and money, yeah, then you need this kind of incentive from somewhere else. And this has to be created, on the one side, from the management of the universities, understanding which kind of university they are leading, or which kind of organization they are leading. On the other side, to create a kind of framework that create incentives that are not part of the original role of professors.
Okay,
maybe as a first start.
So, Benoit, I'm going to come back to you on that, because the incentive piece is very important from an X perspective. But from that question from Julia, how do you, from your position, incentivize professors in colleges to change their what they see as the metric of success?
Well, first of all, I would like to reinforce your point that you just made. If you think about what professors have to deal with, or what they worry about, they might come up with a great idea, but they usually have to worry about first, they have to teach a certain amount of classes per week. Then they have to do the research, they have to do all the paperwork with that, so where are they going to get that extra time? So if you have perhaps a professor that has a great idea, or goes to some venue as such today and meets with some people and have a great idea, and they just have this idea, like, we should talk and we should make this happening. So I think what you really need more in universities are structures that take care of that management part, so that you have units that help professors and help especially small and middle-sized companies to not just meet and say, hey, that's a great idea, we should do something about that. And yeah, and I know your research might really help me, but that this is actually happening. So somebody who's really helping out, running behind the task, setting up those meetings, reminding people of doing that, remind them not to reschedule, actually do that. So I think we have to kind of not also think about leadership from the top, but also how do we enable people to do this? And that basically needs assistance by people who can take care of these tasks. That is one of the reasons why actually in Berlin we are starting to do that. We want to build a central entrepreneurship unit for all the universities for the SPRIND Leuchtturm program, so that there's some help going to be made. We already actually, the Senate of Berlin did it in one university now, that we have a KMU-Büro, so like an office for small and middle-sized companies to just find these connections. And I think this is something that we need to enhance now. But incentives is another thing. I think in the future we could more think about giving universities financial incentives. Okay. But then it comes back to my earlier point, and it's kind of what you also said. If you want to lead or steer in a certain direction, you kind of have to make sure how do you account for your effectiveness of what you do. So we need, in the end, a reporting system, because the larger an organization gets, and if you deal with, in our case, 11 universities, just 11 universities in the state of Berlin, and then you have all the non-university research units and the private ones, this is a lot of data, a lot of steering. So you need kind of a reporting system first to work out. And if we find that, we can also maybe, with the university together, find a way of creating financial incentives too. But in the end, it comes down to culture. It comes down to the appreciation that this is something that's not just a nice to have, but basically what profits, everybody can profit from. I mean, we have amazing examples in Berlin and other places of people who did this, albeit these structures do not exist. But I think this is more a proof of, not a proof that we don't need these structures, it's more a proof that it can happen without them, but maybe it shouldn't. Or it should be, maybe they should have a little more help.
I'm going to come back to, we'll build on that later on, but Benoit, I'll come back to you on that, on the measurement, and then to Raphael, who's kind of experiencing in the mix of all this as well. But from your perspective, that idea of metrics, that the metrics are very, very different for a moonshot than a very established industry or a very establishment like a university.
Yes, and I'm not certain I can give some advice on the metric that the university itself should use, but I can certainly speak of things that we would like to see coming out of university. Earlier, Tim spoke about M-shaped people, people who not only are very strong in biology, but also have a strong background in another domain. So I think having those people who can jump from one domain to another is something we desperately need, especially given the speed at which technology is evolving. The other aspect is, I think we need to prepare people for failure. I think that the university system is kind of that reward and that carrot of you do this and you'll have this. And we kind of train people at succeeding. And once you tackle a really hard problem, guess what? You're going to fail a lot. And we often see people coming out of university, they succeeded at everything. They had A+ everywhere. And then they try their first project, their second, their third, and you see them progressively sinking in that very dark space. So I think that really training people in doing things which will not work and teaching them, being a little bit more on the limb of what is possible is super important. The other aspect is, as I say, we touch many domains of technology. So I think that often we insist too much on having people understanding everything about the subject. What is often much more important is to just know that something is possible. So it's good to get people deeply trained on a subject, but maybe we neglect a little bit that broad knowledge of what are all those technology, what are all those aspects of science, and how can they be used. You can always learn it when you need it. You don't need to know it. I mean, learn it on the fly. You can still learn after you leave university. So how do we get people to be more flexible given the speed and the cross-disciplinary type of things that we need today?
Fantastic. And Raphael, you've experienced this because you're the intersection between government and essentially being an entrepreneur and having a very, very polymathic background as well. You are, I thought, the personification of the Steve Jobs quote about that you cannot be a pirate in the Navy, but you have to actually collaborate with the Navy in your job. So maybe you'll share from the perspective of everything we've talked about, what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned when I sort of switched sides from being an entrepreneur and investor to the public side, right, and you've switched back and forth, Julia, is that it's really a completely different mindset from how an organization should be run. It's not very trust-based, to say the least, in the public sector. Freedom seems to be a bad word. Control seems to be a great word. It's not so much results-oriented, which is also weird when you're coming from the business side, because you're doing things to get a result. It's much more process-oriented. It's very established systems, and the bigger a system gets, the more the system cares about the system. Right? And then it gets entrenched. And then it just lives by in itself, and if it disappears, nobody notices except the people inside the system. Right? And we see that with the scientific system, at least in Germany, a lot. We see that with with the world out there, which is also not exchanging a lot between the two, and then politics is not really interacting with the other two systems all that much. So there's the economy, there's science, there's politics, then there's the people, and people sort of are in one bucket, but never in two, and rarely cross the boundaries. It's also very hard to do that. So, and I cannot recommend it. No, I'm joking. I mean, I think, and I learned that actually in Harvard when I was there a long time ago, that most of the profs, you know, at an age that I'm at now, end of 50, were sort of coming from the economy or maybe from politics, and they just switched sides into teaching. And of course, they knew what they were talking about because they came from the real world. I mean, try that in Germany or Europe. You know, I just call myself professor now. I'm probably going to be shot by somebody who's in charge of that. So, in a way, it's in charge of shooting. In charge of shooting people, yeah, from the Senate. I don't know. You know who that is. You're ducking and covering all the time, I guess. So we're trying to sort of build an organization that translates these two worlds, which is kind of interesting. And so we're very bottom up. When you talk about what's the right mindset of people, what's the right sciencepreneur. Right, you can think about this as much as you want. You're just going to bump into people, and they are the way they are. And now you have to sort of either change that person to your dream person, good luck with that, or build teams that sort of complete the picture. Also, we always over-believe in how much control we have over processes, right? Especially when it comes to innovation. I mean, just forget it. We don't know a thing. The only thing you can do is like, okay, this guy has characteristics that we really see a lot in people that are successful innovators. Right? And so maybe, right, we call them hypotentials. Right? They're usually not the guys with, you know, best grades, with a linear sort of life that they've lived before. It's usually people that are a little weird. Yeah. They don't need to be toxic. That's not a prerequisite, right? Elon, you don't need to be that way. You can just be a great inventor and do stuff. But of course, nobody is complete. So you have to add to the team. You have to give them freedom to just find their way. We're also not doing that with students or not in school, right? We're creating these very linear careers with no time to explore what it might be that one might be interested in. I think kids from today have the biggest difficulty in finding what it is that they, you know, burn for. And once you burn for it, you don't need a work-life balance because you want to do what you're burning for. And if you find people burning for something that might be useful, I think you have most of the ingredients of success for innovation. And now you have to give them a ground where they can just go and let them go and see and check the results. And if they come back with something completely different from what they said before, that's great, as long as it is an innovation. And now try financing that in a public system. So if you're a scientist, you write, you know, project proposals or something. You know, you write them for a year, you send them in. It takes another year until you get approved, and then you have to explain, you know, what pen you're buying in 3 years, and don't dare to buy another pen. Right? I mean, how is that science? You got to know everything in advance, and of course, smart scientists do what? They always have a finished project in the drawer. They send a project proposal for that, and then work on new stuff while they're pretending to work on the stuff that they wrote the project proposal for. Why are we doing these things? There's very little room in the systems we've got for serendipity. But serendipity creates success, and it's unpredictable, but you have to give it room. So in a way, that's sort of my leadership statement. The only thing I can do is create this ground for serendipity, give the hypos sort of the, you know, the place to be, and sort of keep the government away from it, right? and just send the money to go home.
You can't. Mic drop. Mic drop. You can't pre-business plan buying a pen. But the challenge goes right back to the M again. If you think about that, as a student in school, I have a thing. I get to the top of the ladder, I realize it's against the wrong wall, and I want to change walls, and everybody's looking at me, and I feel, oh, I'm ashamed of this. That gets carried into education, that gets carried into academia, that gets carried into organizations, that gets carried into government, and you're seen as a failure for being the person to jump from one field to the next. Maybe you'll expand on that, because how do we fix that? Is that a societal, is that a mindset? Is that how we view people? Or can we do things from an organizational level, an educational level?
I mean, I can speak a bit about Google X on that front. Strangely enough, we tend to underestimate the ability of people to learn as they grow in their career. And I've got that example of having a person who's a double PhD in physics. And I was telling him, we need someone who really understands photolithography for chip design. And he told me, I don't know anything about that. And I told him, okay, you have 3 weeks. Go away. Right? And in 3 weeks, he went to seminar, read lots of books, wrote some simulation. He's not world class, but after 3 weeks, he came back and he was totally holding his own. So let's allow people to use their base and grow and get into domain where they are not going to be the best at first, but they can grow into becoming it. Allow people to make mistakes. I mean, that's the other obvious one. If you feel that everything you say has to be perfectly correct, otherwise people are going to be, he doesn't know that domain. That really stops people from trying new things. And often those people who goes in another domain and take their metaphor, takes their knowledge and transfer it to a new domain are truly the people who do new things. So encourage it and don't make people feel bad about being wrong. So I think these are probably some of the current things that we do. Of course, create the substrate. I mean, get an organization where people really are encouraged to talk across domain, where you can have lots of tech talks and really continuously immerse people into things that they do not know. But a smart person is a smart person. You bring him on a new domain, trust the person to evolve and bring total novelty. And that's really something we do every day.
Imagine you were trying to bring that into politics. Like, that's just, how do you even start with that? And kind of, guys and girls, we're going to change things around here. How do you even begin?
Well, step by step. To give you one example, my first statement, I told you we just had these Hochschul university contracts, right? I remember my boss, the senator, he was still working at Freie University. She told me there was once that point that they didn't have stamps anymore because on that budget title within the public budget, it was they bought too many stamps, so they had to wait till the next year. That was the 1980s or 70s. And that's one of the reasons why, for instance, I'm just giving this an example, Berlin has started doing these Hochschulverträge, so we're giving them a global sum. We set up goals, the metrics, the reporting system is important for accountability. We say, this is the sum you get. You know what's best. You know how to do your job better than we do. That's not our job to tell you how to do research. Our job is different. Our job is to support you, fight for your funds, control also a bit, accountability towards the public. But this is one way of doing this. So in that case, they can buy pens if they think they need pens. But in the end, I think we have to be careful here with something. Because yes, the right to failure. But then again, let's not forget that the more we want or ask of researchers that all of their products can be used in the economy, in business, we can't take that freedom to fail away. And the traditional university aspect of Grundlagenforschung, basic research that does not have to lead to something, is that freedom to fail. And I think this is also important to keep that in mind. So I'm not saying we should go back to the old ways where this is the only thing universities do, but let's not just run away to the other extreme and say this doesn't matter anymore. So in the end, when it comes to government, private sector, yes, I think the government should set frameworks, should stay out of certain things. The difference is, I answer to the public. If I spend money on universities and they fuck up, and therefore we cannot fund hospitals, fund schools, we have to answer to the public. That's different than answering to your own bank account or to investors. And this is something that you need to keep in mind. So in the end, it is okay that governments do not work as businesses do, and they shouldn't. But, and you said you cannot be a pirate and be in the Navy. However, the most successful pirate in world's history was Francis Drake, who operated under the protection of the British Crown. So, the Francis Drake project, perhaps, with the Spring Authority. So maybe this is the way we can operate, as we do with SPRIND, that there are some places where we say, no, we want something that is sort of an enabler, a bridge between the public and the private sphere. Let the private sphere do what they do best. Let the public sphere that does better than the private one. And find these borders, these edges. And I think the important point is that what you said, we need to find more ways of becoming a little more free and becoming a little more liberal and a bit more creative, saying that not everybody who's a professor has had to spend his entire day since he was 19 years old or she was 19 years old in university. Have some entrepreneurs becoming professors, have some professors become entrepreneurs, mix things up a bit. Let's not forget all of the good things that have already been there. So we don't know, maybe perhaps we don't need to invent everything new, but just mix things up a bit.
Brilliant. Innovation happens at the intersections. I have one last question for each of you, maybe a top line. If you're stuck in a lift and you just had a one-liner on this, if Fairy Godmother granted you one wish that you could change leadership, what would that be? To encourage sciencepreneurship, what would it be? Raphael, maybe you start.
Well, exchange the fear gene for one that encourages people to just experiment stuff and not be worried about, blaming themselves because they've failed or they're switching path. Especially in Germany, I think we have a big part of our DNA with this gene, and I want to replace that.
Beautiful. Julia?
Well, maybe something like a wise leadership, really specialized to universities now, because I think, as I said, this is one of my biggest understandings in this field, is you have to understand how your very specific organization works like. And if you don't understand this, and of course this needs knowledge, education, and so on, if you don't understand this, you will always take the wrong decisions. So by saying wise leadership, I mean, you need this kind of understanding. You have to take the time. You maybe have to invest, into getting this knowledge, really to be able to take the right decisions and maybe have the patience also to execute it, especially in these very special systems of universities.
And it's the right thing to do for the person as well, for the leader that you're trying to recruit as well, so they're not failing.
Absolutely. I think maybe if I might add this, the recruitment of personnel in universities, like professors, I think this is a huge possibility to change things, looking more on the skill side besides to research and to getting funding stuff. Are these people able to cooperate? Do they have an interest in the organization of this university they apply at, and not only to their specific field, which is not necessarily connected to the university? So all these kind of issues you might check in a recruiting process, and this is something we don't even look at the moment in Germany. I don't want to say it for other countries.
Okay. Henry, from your perspective, if there was one thing you could do from how you see the world, what would that be if you could have that wish?
Unlimited public finances? No, but we were talking about leadership. I think the most important things were already said. I would wish leadership to have more time and patience because of all the tasks that I would have to do. Because besides all these things we already mentioned, I think one important thing about leadership is really about communication within the organization, but also to the wider public, whether it be the interested public or the public in general per se. And just the more we find leaders who are truly capable of explaining why things are important and why things might go wrong, but in the end we are better off if we fail a bit, but in the end are successful. Having these communication skills and engaging in that discourse and not just saying, we're right, we know what we're doing, so it's just a better way, but to just really engage in that communication, convince people to perhaps even join in or at least have that confidence, that trust in whatever they're leading. And so the time, the patience, and the skills for communication.
But I'm going to come to you, but if anybody's any questions, you might put up your hand as well, and we'll come back to you. One of the best books I've read, though, is JFK's Profiles in Courage. It was a book about politicians who made unsavory decisions that were no good for their own career, but the right thing for the country. And that bravery is so beneficial as well in any organization. Benoit, for you, le dernier mot.
I will probably riff a bit on the idea of finding the fear gene. I think that in so many domains of human activity, we are limiting ourselves for irrational fears. And some fears are good. They can keep you alive in some cases. But I think that teaching people, and maybe even in the education system, to understand a little bit more what are the fears that they feel and how to control those things, would probably let people do things which are riskier. Related to that, I think we need to document failure. I think that we are in a society that celebrates success so much that we miss the learning of failure, and that can even be at the research level, and it creates unreasonable expectation for people, I think. So I think both, let's learn a little bit about our fears and how to deal with it, and then let's celebrate a little bit more reasonable failure. I mean, if you do a project and you break the laws of thermodynamics, that's not a good failure. But a good failure is something where you gave it a fair shot, and that was a reasonable assumption.
If you manage to break it
We have a couple of questions, Nicholas. Three people here. Yeah. And by the way, the beautiful work here is by Gabrielle Heitzel, and you can check out her websites there as well for those people interested.
Yep. So a lot of good points in there. One of the things that really resonated was, how we're talking about rigid systems, and especially in the education sector. But one of the things our education sectors, I think, across the world, and more so in, Europe or Australia and, this side of the world, is we teach a lot of our degrees in silos. If you're doing engineering, you're purely doing engineering, which is not the case that you see in the, in the American countries, for example. And that's something that is not encouraging transdisciplinary research, not just from a point of university, but also if you take it down to schools. We teach maths isolated, we teach science isolated. And at the same time, when we're looking at jobs, right? Any company offering a job wants a certain degree. So from your perspective, how do you sort of justify saying that translational research is very important, and yet our actions as education systems and as industries is we are still just selectively targeting specific careers and all? I loved your point that, broaden that spectrum, but the entry level is that. This is the entry criteria. After that, you can learn, but we're still reinforcing that that's the way to get to a table. So if you have a comment on that.
Julia?
Maybe a fast comment. I think this is why, at least I'm looking from the German system now. Yeah, this might be different in different systems or different countries, but for the German system, you can say because of this huge constitutional guaranteed freedom of research and teaching, you have to. This is why I'm skeptic, by the way, for kind of a reporting system, because if you tell a professor in Germany, do this, and he says, I don't, nothing happens, okay? So you need different systems to create incentives, and this might be by recruiting, for example. Yeah, if you ask in recruiting processes, are you interested in interdisciplinary research? Yeah, this might be a good point, and if this person says no, and you as a university say, this is important for us and for our students, then this might be a critical point, yeah? Or that you put it in funding guidelines and say you only get a funding for your project if it's interdisciplinary, for example, yeah? So I think we have to create a kind of workaround to the university system, because you can't steer like in a management style, right? So this might give two ideas to your question.
Right beside you, Nicholas.
So, hi, I'm Helmut. I'm running the largest European Entrepreneurship Center, and to Henry and Julia, I don't understand you. So why can't you lead? And so about KPIs, it's pretty easy. What are the KPIs to build up a good startup ecosystem? Just ask Raphael, and he'll answer you this question in 5 minutes. And so one of my and why can't you lead here in Berlin, for example? So one family member of mine, he's a PhD here, and he's over 6 months a year on holidays, traveling around. And I think, how does this happen in this city? So this is my question. So why don't you start leading?
I'm not sure I understood your question, though.
Okay, I give it a try, okay? So I think this was my point. I think that we don't really understand. We talk about leading in universities, which kind of organizations we're leading. And as I said, I'm talking about the German system. Yeah, I think it's totally different in the States, for example, because you have a different incentive system. But if you, as a president or whatever in your university, and you say to your professors, we are going, this is our strategy, and now we are going to do this and that, you don't have any guarantee. Yeah, the kind of leadership tools that you have in a normal management situation, they are missing at least in a German university system.
So I'm in the management board of a leading German university, and you can do this.
You can do it, but you don't have guarantee. And I'm in many strategy processes in universities. Yeah, sometimes you have a crew, and I don't give examples because I don't want to expose someone. Sometimes you have a team that is able to commit on something. Yeah. And then you can see in the university system, in the organization, that things are working. But you have, on the same side, you have universities where it's just not accepted, and I don't want to do any blaming here, so don't get me wrong, yeah? But of course, due to this educated freedom of teaching and research, and being the professors public servants, you don't have the classical management tools to lead as you could do it in other organizations. If you can do it in your university, you might explain why it's working in your university, then we might come closer.
So I'm from the Technical University of Munich, and so we have a management
I was
team.
guessing that, by the way.
Yeah, and we just do it, yeah, and there's no, I really don't understand why you can't do it in any other university in Germany. There's not a reason what we say, like, Freiheit von Forschung und Lehre. That is true, but that doesn't mean that this is a law-free zone. No, people have contracts, people can work. So we in this country, we spend more money into research than the Americans do. Yeah, but so there is money here. And let's start and lead these universities. And also Berlin is such a fantastic place, has so great universities, but unlock these universities and make them free and give them a target. And then this will be, again, the best startup city in Germany. But I think you have to lead this and don't wait like 3 years to find out what the right KPIs are. You should do it now and then write an email to all the vice presidents for Christmas, and then they should start on January 1st.
Happy Christmas.
No, I would actually like to answer that for a single question. I think there might be a slight misconception of what the role is that I have, because I don't think that Alois Jung traditionally calls you and tells you what to do at the TUM, and I think you would tell him to, not very polite ways, or perhaps polite ways, that this is not his affair. You would not take that order from someone of the Bavarian state, and neither should you. We lead. You can ask the Berlin University, we just had those contractors. You can ask them if I'm willing to set my weight behind the goals that I want them to do. Please go ahead and do. But, and this is what the colleague just said, there are limits to freedom and limits to steering leadership. And also don't buy in the argument that there is no startup activities in Berlin, that our universities are not good at that. Sorry, so I just frankly do not agree with your statement.
Nicholas, we've a gentleman here. Yeah, die letzte. We'll take a coffee break then. And the conversations can continue during the coffee break.
Okay, so I think I'm in support of the point which you mentioned, that we could take away some work from the professors by giving them some management support in terms of accelerating the innovation towards more marketable technology. The point I'm trying to make is, how can we otherwise incentivize? Everybody is looking for two goals you mentioned, it's money or the publication. Can the money already not channel into, like, can we not have more patent supporting structures? These are so bound by laws in such a way, integrate procedures, that they become such a big energy barrier. I'll rather publish and not worry about protecting the next best innovation. Can the government, can the law come to help there? That's the question I want to ask to all the policymakers here.
The answer is quite simple, yes. On many different areas of governmental norm setting or funding. I mean, these are two different kind of things. We do already provide funding for this. We're already incentivizing universities to be even better at that, and helping them to make these fundings permanent. So we have already new projects incoming, new people coming in. And yeah, this is always something that you have to work on to reduce regulation where it exists. And then, and this is something that we talked about, steering the organization to the inside. I think that part of my job is to, we also need a certain mindset in the authorities of saying that sometimes we just have to
5 Grad sein lassen. So just to let things go slide a little bit. Not to be reckless, but to not have it in a very rigid way of making things happening and saying, okay, we less process-oriented, but more goal-oriented. And this is also what I think in the end is leadership, that you, whatever your jurisdiction is, you kind of try to steer people into that direction and making that happen a little more.
Okay, guys. Do we have time for one more, Nicola? No? Okay. You maybe ask the guys during the coffee break. It's been a pleasure having this panel together.